Oliver trying to make technology work. So if you could just maybe run the presentation as not to it with my computer, and I will burn it right directly after this session, but in between it would be great if you could help and run through the presentation, as I can't.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as I'm just linking in with my telephone, which is the only device that seems to work today.
Okay. So, but you can.
Thank you very much.
So you also can't see the presentation actually.
Well, I can see it on a very tiny on the phone. That's fine. I can deal with that.
Good. So you know which slide we have actually. Okay. I think we will.
Yes.
As well. Good.
Great. Fantastic.
So, yeah, the word is yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthias, and thanks to GIZ for inviting me to this one, and thanks all for joining us this afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are. I'll run through some slides over the next little while, and then we can hopefully have an interesting discussion as well on the various bits and pieces that we have talked about. Next one, please.
Just takes a second, I suppose. Okay. There's some delay we had that. Okay, that's too fast. Okay, here we are.
Perfect. So, mention a few key messages from the 5th IPCC assessment report, which was launched this summer, and then go into the mitigation potential in the sector, and more specifically on how to shift to a 2-degree scenario pathway for both developed and developing countries, and then talking about some national and local policies, and wrap up the session. Next. Great. So Matthias mentioned some of the key figures already. We all know them and we use them. That's why I didn't throw them up here. But what is interesting in that particular graph is that considering the reasonable amount, not overwhelming, but reasonable amount of some countries on the efficiency side in particular in the sector, all of that has been eaten up by additional travel demand in both the passenger and the freight sector over the last 20 years. So that really gives us an indication how tricky our sector is and how big the challenge is that we are facing. And adding to that, in many of the countries that we work in, that travel demand is even growing now even faster than in the past, so that we are likely to look at a doubling of current transport sector CO2 emissions from currently around about 7 gigatons to about 14 under a business as usual scenario, so if nothing additionally happens. But of course, after this webinar, life will be very different. Next, please. Right. What we do see here when we look at the different regions of the world, that the story that we are talking about is quite a different one. In the OECD still far dominates the transport CO2 emissions, in particular on a per capita basis. But the growth, in particular in Asia, but also in Latin America, is so fast that these regions will catch up, considering also their vast population. Also, this is a major issue, so that will later work about priorities in the different regions. OECD has to move first and stronger to allow some breathing space for the emerging and developing countries over the next years. And the small graph on the right-hand side there, an indication that is a little bit different to other sectors, where with increasing wealth, the share of the transport CO2 emissions of the overall emissions are exponentially increasing. So when people become, at some point they have enough lamps and enough fridges and enough TVs, and that share of their energy consumption in their daily energy consumption stabilizes. But that's different with transport. It seems that people cannot get rich enough to stop, continue driving, wanting to drive more. So it's a big challenge that we have to deal with. And when we talk about behavioral policies and instruments, that becomes a big one. Next one, please. So the regional differences are not just in the overall travel demand, but also in the structure of that travel. So that it could be described more as an opportunity in many ways, that we have already great shares of, in particular, public transport and also non-motorized transport in many of the emerging and developing countries in particular, where we have a better opportunity to stabilize that, as behaviors have not locked in an high carbon travel behavior. So that certainly could be, an open door for us working in this area to focus on stabilizing, unlikely to be increasing considering the massive travel demand growth, but stabilizing currently already high levels of low carbon transport modes. Next one, please. Oh, right. I did have another one anyway. Well, then maybe just talking about this, that yeah.
Okay, that's the slide, no? I think there's none in between.
It doesn't matter. We'll get to that later anyway. I'm talking about fuel efficiency that we'll have to consider at some point as well, because, I mean, we surely want everyone to not be driving a car, but there will be cars driving around, and considering the massive loss, which is like 2/3 of the whole energy that is put into the system is lost, and only 1/3 of the whole energy is actually providing the mechanical energy that we use for our transport services. So that's certainly a big area of potential here as well. And so arriving at that, the recognition that all policy options are required for a 2-degree scenario target was also quite an interesting process within the authors team for the transport chapter for the assessment report, because as usual, as you have it in many of your workshops and daily work, there are like these two camps of the car and technology community and the city and urban transport community, and everyone of course thinks that only one part can deal the whole thing. But in this discussion we really came to the conclusion that getting down to a 2-degree pathway, there is no opportunity of an either or. There is really the need for both local and national policies, as well as technology and activity and shift measures. Okay, the next one, please. Right, and that's changing in the old school to a certain extent as well. So This wedge diagram we've seen many times before, I guess, from the International Energy Agency, and their logic, of course, is that if you improve the efficiency to the level that is technically possible and shift to low carbon fuels that is deemed to be technically feasible, then you are reaching a substantial emission reduction already. And that's why they kind of add on the shift and avoid aspects only to make up for the last 25%. But now they increasingly realize as well that this may be the upside down approach in a way that from a sustainability perspective, it's far more desirable to go for the shift and avoid first, and then for all the remaining cars that are out there, achieve as much efficiency and shift to as required low carbon fuels to get to the same goal. So in the new iteration of the energy technology perspective, one of the key messages that the International Energy Agency gives every year, this will come out much stronger. So if we go to the next one. So there we don't just talk about the fuel efficiency potential, which in fact is between 30 and 50% over the next decades. So we would be silly if we wouldn't use that for the existing fleet. So for the same level of service, the efficiency gains can be made using existing technologies, so not hoping for panaceas or entirely new technologies for vehicles. Already the existing technology has built in an efficiency potential of up to 50%, so that's clearly a key policy lever. And going out to 2050 then, e-mobility and hydrogen, still unclear which one is the likely one to win, but we'll currently talk about both as well, is getting far more bigger potential. Biofuels are still on the iffy side of things. It's unlikely that with first generation biofuels they will play a big role. Well, there we really have to wait for breakthroughs in the biofuel technology and preparation. So it's a far bigger question mark on this. Next one, please. But even here, so what for our eyes looks quite little in terms of what this 2-degree scenario considers feasible for the shift and avoid part, they already have the other question in the other direction, if that is doable on the city level. So a 25% reduction, how through modal shifts and how through reduced trip lengths, is already what they consider a big ask for cities. So here it would certainly be very helpful from our community in a way, from the urban mobility community, to provide more evidence than is currently available on the actual emission reduction potential on a city level, and then scaling that up to global figures to make it the case stronger that urban mobility can really play a major role in a 2-degree world. Next one, please. Right. And this is again just to illustrate on a global level. how the two parts of the world, let's say, the developed and the developing world, if you want to put it that way, you have to contribute to that pathway. So here you clearly see first the vast difference on a per capita basis on vehicle kilometers traveled between OECD and non-OECD countries, but then also the big effort that is required from OECD countries till the mid of the century to reduce travel demand in particular, and then out of this graph, but in addition to that, the carbon content of this travel. And that is absolutely essential to facilitate the growth that is needed in the non-OECD countries to develop economically. Next one, please. And to look at that regionally, we've just played around with those figures from the energy technology perspectives, so with the wedge diagram that you've seen before, and looked at potential pathways for OECD and non-OECD countries to highlight the fact that a balanced approach would be the one to go for. Next one, please. And so we've used the same targets and the same population developments, but played around with the avoid shift, or in that case we used the structural decomposition. So with the activity and structure and with the intensity and fuels part. To next one, please. To illustrate how different scenarios would look like for the two regions. So if we focus in the OECD countries on activity and structure primarily, and efficiency is only a smaller part of the whole structure, it becomes incredibly challenging. So we're talking about a reduction of car travel of 60% by 2050. So while this may be desirable from walkable cities perspective, let's say, on a nationwide level that becomes highly unlikely, let's say. Still, in some places, in some cities may be feasible, but on a national level that appears to be too challenging, not possible. But also, on the other hand, if we only would focus on a technology solution side, as some would advocate for, the technology that would not be able to deliver a scenario that would not see any reduction in travel demand and in car-based travel demand over the next 40 years. So a balance in that regard that would reduction of about 30% of the car travel demand, and 50%, that's what we said earlier on the efficiency side, would seem the most reasonable and most feasible from the developed countries' perspective. In the non-OECD countries, next one. We could still facilitate in a balanced approach an increase of over 200% in per capita travel demand, car-based travel demand, but requiring substantially less efficiency gains and ship low carbon energy carriers. So this again for the either technology-focused or public transport-focused one is unlikely to be feasible, even though we'll get to that in a minute as well. High shift scenarios are an option as well, and but even this one would require a substantial upscaling of the current urban transport systems to feed the demand that is coming. So a balanced approach here again would still facilitate reasonable increase, and with that facilitate economic and social development, but still stay on a track on the 2-degree scenario if the OECD part of does their work. Next one, please. Not really, as we all over many years, the balance between avoiding, shifting, and improving our travel every day is the key to the whole story. And next one, please. And that would generate far higher socioeconomic benefits, and when striking a balance would be even cost effectively taking into account all the co-benefits such as air quality and safety and access and so energy efficiency. Next one, please. Right. And also, you know, from the technology perspectives, strong shifts to low carbon modes also make it easier for the vehicle fleet to deliver on its requirements. So if everything has to be picked up by technology, that is not technically feasible, apart from the fact that we'll still be all stuck in congestion and no safety improvements and parking issues and all that. So there is a logical link between the two, which both sides of will have to recognize for sure. Next one, please. Right. And while we talk about that, that clearly indicates that both the national and the local level will have to play their role in the policy mix to deliver on the technology potential and also facilitate local sustainable urban development. Next one, please. So to really integrate policy measures both in each level and among the levels of governance is a key factor to avoid trade-offs and to create synergies. So from the national level, the framework policies that are required to move to a 2-degree scenario are primarily the fuel tax, differentiated vehicle tax, and the regulation on the vehicle fuel efficiency. And that certainly can be supported by information campaigns, but also specifically targeted measures on specific technologies and fuels. But the key are really the first ones. And next one, please. Before we talk about fuel tax, we'll have to get rid of the incredible amount of money that is wasted on fuel subsidies still in countries. In 2011 alone, over almost $300 billion were wasted on oil in particular petrol fuel subsidies. That money, of course, could be, very well be used and needed to upscale urgently needed public transport. And next one, please. And to develop on and economic objectives and not focus fuel subsidies in particular. And that's even there is a range of countries having vastly different policies. If you would continue that now to the countries that tax their fuels quite heavily, that would show the range even further. And say apart from Saudi Arabia, the first ones here in the list aren't really the wealthiest countries on the planet. So wasting precious public funds for subsidizing fuels that in fact only benefit at least from the middle class upwards, that certainly is not a wise thing to do. So I mean, there are reasonable pledges from most of these countries to phase these subsidies out, and it's certainly not an easy task. Nigeria has tried that and has faced substantial backlash against the idea of removing fuel subsidies. So not an easy task, but definitely something that we desperately need from the national level to provide a framework for sustainable transport policies. Next one, please. And if we then go further, actually tax fuel use, we'll then get into a level where we can really directly influence the use of vehicles and also the choice of transport modes. So that picture shows where, countries lie in their average fuel price. So not surprisingly, the countries that have taxed fuel, like the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, have also the highest travel demand, passenger travel demand for light-duty vehicles. So this is really a key policy lever from the national level, and if it's developed in a clever way, like the eco-tax, for example, and coming with the idea from Switzerland, but implemented also in Germany, that redistributes funds from activities that sort of harm society, in that case energy consumption, and redistribute that to reduce the pressure on social security costs, so providing benefits for the vast majority of society from that, and then also investing in renewable energies, having funds for other activities as well. That certainly provides a level of transparency that people can buy in and see where the link is between the two elements of taxing and using those taxes. Next one, please. So that's on the side of this. So to discourage inefficient use of cars, but then also will shape the efficiency lead, and that can be done two ways. Regulation is one, and the other one is providing incentives and disincentives from the tax system that can help steering the consumer's choice toward more efficient vehicles. And the fee-based system is one example here. In many countries that is done on the national level. However, there are also other examples from the local level, for example, Shanghai or Singapore, where incentives are given not directly in those cases linked to CO2 emissions, but it can be done in a similar way. So there is an open door there as well to influence consumer behavior and purchase behavior. Next one, please. And on the industry side, eco-fuel efficiency standards are quite an essential part to provide incentives or disincentives, let's say, for industry to shape their vehicle fleets and innovation toward lower carbon vehicles, even though they tend to cheat on these ones as well, so testing becomes an issue and oversight becomes an issue. But generally speaking, that is a third part of those three core pillars from the national level that is required to boost efficiency. And on the local level, obviously, so for bigger range of solutions available there, such as congestion charting, public transport, urban logistics, and any others. Right. So, I mean, the key obviously for many city administrations, as they're usually the owner and operator, or at least regulator of the public transport system, is the provision of high quality and affordable, safe and reliable as well public transport. So it's quite some demand on the public transport side, but that's sort of key of trying to avoid that people have, feel the need to move to a car, for example, to feel safer, and reliability is less an issue there, but safety certainly is one of the key factors, apart from the status that is slightly more tricky to change from a cultural perspective. But the safety issue is certainly a core element here as well to sustain a high level of public transport. And then ways of reclaiming space for people and making cities walkable and cyclable. And as you may have seen in a recent study from UC Davis and ITDP, these big figures there accumulated over 4 decades almost, but it's good to have those highlight figures that we can not just save a decent amount of carbon emissions, so we're talking about 1.7 or 1,700 megatons of carbon dioxide, but also save a bucket load of money along the way by saved petrol and in particular. So getting to the next one. There, just have a closer look at what these scenarios look like. So we did say in the beginning that balance is the key to strike for, and here that builds on the same model, on the IEA's mobility model, and on the same scenario. So that's again just playing around with figures a little bit. But trying to show how, from a baseline scenario where we see a massive increase in car use, surprisingly obviously, and a reasonable stabilization of public transport. From the next one. To really curbing car-based travel demand and massively upscaling urban transport, in particular urban bus. And yeah, well, that's the scenario that can come up with substantial and massive gains, both in terms of air quality, but also in terms of productivity and efficiency gains over the next decade. So certainly is an interesting view of from the other perspective. So we had the efficiency perspective in the beginning, and that's the very positive view on the potential of a high shift scenario. What we can do in the urban space to contribute to the scenario. Next one, please. I should speed up, but we have a few more minutes. Right, so Conting is sort of in a similar way one of those measures that we have on the national level to manage travel operation and car transport use on the local level. Very successfully introduced in Singapore and then copied in many other places around the world. And there we do have a little bit of a tricky issue where we do see indeed a traffic reduction that is very substantial, but also because of that then an increase in travel speeds, and with that then obviously some of the gains are then rebounded and eaten up by the increased speed. Not a very straightforward thing, but definitely an excellent contributor in an integrated package, and also a reasonable safety measure here as well, please. Logistics side, there's a substantial efficiency gains potential for optimized logistics up to 60% during the whole value chain by trip consolidation and load factor increases and fleet management. So here again an area that is sometimes not as in depth looked at as other parts of our work. So as we have seen in the beginning, freight is almost half the business of the whole CO2 emissions globally. So certainly something where we can dig into more deeper on providing advice on urban logistics issues along with the other advice that we're giving. Next one, please. The low carbon vehicles, maybe just a few points. They're really the focus for the moment is it's an air quality issues, which is fine, and it does make sense to start playing around with those ideas to be ready when the energy grid is ready to have a decent contribution to carbon emission reductions from that side. Most typically it makes sense to start with fleets that are in either owned by the cities or regulated by the cities, in particular the taxi fleets or the municipal fleets or the bus fleets are certainly the ones that make sense to electrify first. Next one, please. And here again, an aspect on e-mobility. When we've done something great, like the massive push to electric two-wheelers in China, for example, which is has been an enormous success to some point, but then the policy wasn't thought through entirely, and now many cities are scaling back on that and even prohibiting at least electric scooters as a safety issue. So here it's not necessarily always an on and off solution where there we introduce a technology, and if it doesn't work we prohibit it. But we could have, one way of dealing with that would have just been, a regulation for annual checks of the brakes and the lights, and even having, noise emitters to that to still support that development, but deal with the safety issues there. Tricky issue here, but we'll see how that evolves. And maybe the last one on the local policy measures. Next one. Not much on the actual planning and transport-oriented development, which is great, and that should be fostered and supported by our work every day for sure. But maybe just stressing the issue that is coming with the idea of a sustainable urban mobility plan, the public participation. If that's done properly, it can mitigate a lot of the political issues that come with some of those solutions that are often championed by, on the local level, or by a mayor or a councillor, and then are subject to political change after an election. So if there has been a decent amount of public participation, then it's much harder for the incoming party then to change that, as many of the people have bought into this. So certainly an idea that we can promote in our work, and that is spreading well outside Europe to other parts of the world. In Brazil now it's mandatory, in India it's becoming a big issue there as well. So next one please. That brings us to, if we do all that and do it in that way, cities definitely can become hotspots for co-benefits, and not just reduce CO2 emissions, but if we do it in a proper way and increase energy security, energy efficiency, safety, access, and air quality. But next one, please. We use the co-benefits quite often, but forward as that. So it very much depends on the design of a policy if we talk about co-benefits or risks. So, many of the solutions, many of the policies, for example, trying to get people off from their motorbikes by higher taxes, for example, and into perceived safer cars, obviously has led in many of the OECD countries to an increase in CO2 emissions. So that wasn't so clever. And likewise, designing a system where people are exposed to road safety and air quality issues in a system that isn't ready for this yet doesn't always help as well. And that next one, please. And along with the air quality is a major issue, far more important for mayors than climate change. So really trying to build policies along the way that we sell climate change as a co-benefit and not these co-benefits as co-benefits of climate change is definitely on the local level the wisest way to go for. So what does it mean for us? Next one, please. So in our daily work, we should be able to provide advice that covers all the relevant aspects and all the potential linkages to other policy objectives. So even though we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, that's not always a straightforward story. It has effects on many other policy objectives as well, all the advice that we're giving. So we'll have to really provide a full picture on the societal costs and benefits. And with that, to have at least a few more minutes to discuss, I'll probably stop here and would be more than keen and have a chat with you about.
Yeah, so thanks, Oliver.
Very much.
It was a very good presentation. I took a lot of points for myself that I would actually like to have for a short wrap up, but in fact, or that we just have like 7 or 8 more minutes. I rather leave the floor to our participants. And there's already a question. And the first question, before I raise this question, I would just tell, so everyone is welcome to raise questions via the chat functions. And if you are not eager to write down the question, you can also just note that you would like to raise a question via the microphone, and I will unmute you then. We're having already the first question from Ihab Al-Masri. And I'm sorry, this is just a general question if we have the chance to ask questions. So yes, and of course we will also share the presentation with all the participants. This will be available later on the capsule webpage, and I will provide you also with the link for that. So then there is the next question. Then there's the first question from Kirsten Adlunger. And this one is, in the field of low carbon fuels, what is your opinion of power to gas and power to liquid on a global scale?
Right. When you say power, you mean, well, the power can come from various, if we talk about Fischer-Tropsch, for example, so that's probably the most ridiculous thing that one can even think about. So, coal and lignite, into petrol, if that's what you're like driving at. Oh well, on the basis of renewable energies. Okay, well that's a different thing. Okay, so well, okay, but there we would be talking about biofuels then, or is it not what you're driving at? Do I get this right? Are you talking about biofuels then?
I understand it as biofuel and biogas as a vehicle fuel.
Right, yeah. Well, I did touch on that. It is on a first generation of biofuels becoming a very hot topic, was in fact one of the hottest topics along with CCS and nuclear power in the IPCC team. So the potentials, the mitigation potentials of first generation biofuels are very, very limited. It's true that the Brazil sugarcane biofuels have at least reasonable, so less than 50%, but still reasonable CO2 emission reduction potential. But as we all know, on the land use issue, that's becoming a major driver that directly affects biodiversity and deforestation. So certainly not an option to go for. And if we talk about, U.S. corn-based biofuels, they even can have a higher carbon content than current petrol. So on the first generation, that's a very big question mark, to say the least. But second and third generation, if you talk about, breaking off the content or the energy content of agricultural waste, which is not working so well, but it could certainly become a much more promising issue.
There's some.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a clarification. Okay, so electricity-based fuels. Right. Well, yeah. Well, okay. Well, on the e-mobility side, of course. I mean, that's the key prerequisite, obviously, for electric mobility. So if we go below a level of carbon content in the electricity mix that makes e-mobility sensible, then we should only be talking about this, practically speaking, at least from a climate change perspective. May make sense from others, but from a climate change perspective, even electricity mixes like in countries in Germany don't actually contribute really, to CO2 emissions. So yeah, renewables there are essential.
Yeah, okay. I would also add to that question. That is also the question how we use that energy and in which way. So it comes to my mind that the issue is better to have two cars which work in a car sharing system which operate on electric energy than to have 10 private cars that work on fossil fuels. Yeah? So
indeed. Right. Or, you know, having one electric-powered bus, that certainly makes a big difference. So on the fleets, as we said, you know, with the taxi fleets and the buses there, it really becomes an issue.
Okay, we are running.
A positive one.
Okay.
Yes, we're running out of time. Okay.
But the last question from Stefan Säum I would like to raise. Can you read it? The question is, on the slide showing the modal shift option, the figure also showed an overall reduced passenger kilometer traveled. What are the assumptions on those options?
Righto. I'd be more than happy to follow up with you bilaterally, Stefan. I'll have to look into the spreadsheet.
Which is a little difficult at the moment, I think, yeah.
But I'm happy to follow up on that bilaterally. Let me have a look. Right, so I mean, in all the scenarios, the reduced passenger kilometers traveled are built in there as well, obviously invisible. So that's you know, also, you know, the good old void part in our system where we, you know, reduce trip length, and that not only goes for car trips but also for public transport trips and walking and cycling them as well. If a city is more compact, then you have to do that on a short basis. So that's probably half answers your question, but I'm happy to send you some of that information as well if you want.
All right. So thank you, Oliver. Yes, the invitation to everyone. In the case there are any questions remaining, we are more than happy to answer them via mail. I think is the best option. And finish also, I would like to offer you some additional information. So our colleagues from the GIZ Transport Project are working with countries on the development of transport now as national appropriate mitigation actions, which is quite a promising instrument to implement climate-friendly transport policies and as well as infrastructure measures. And especially I recommend their case studies and fact sheets on certain policy options and options what we can do about urban transport, about sustainable transport on the webpage links provided here. In the framework of the Sustainable Urban Transport Projects, I recommend you to have a look at the publication Urban Transport and Climate Change, which we just recently updated a few months ago. Also, Oliver has been involved in this update. And for more general knowledge about the instruments of how to tackle urban transport with a special regard to reducing private transport and increasing the energy efficiency, have a look at the publication Transportation Demand Management. Also there's the Bridging the Gap initiative, which is a multi-stakeholder partnership which tries to lobby for sustainable transport in the international climate discussion. So they provide also a lot of further information if you are interested more on the policy, on the international policy level. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, further from Capsule, you have probably already seen this webpage. It's quite a new web platform on trainings, webinars, online courses that is open for all organizations which offer such trainings or study courses in the field of sustainable urban transport. And further information for us, recently we published also a new publication on car sharing services in emerging economies, which also takes up a little bit the issue of how to reduce the high level of car ownership and to have to more intelligently use and economize private motorized mobility. And of course, our general webpage from GIZ, Transport and Mobility, the SUTP project. You will also find us on Facebook and Twitter, and we have a nice photo database in case you need some pictures for your presentations or for any publication. Please feel free to search there. So once more, thanks to Oliver and thanks to everyone for attending our webinar. Please feel free to contact us in any question, and also I'm happy to see you again in our webinar series.
Thank you very much. Have a great one. And if I can clarify anything, also the invitation of sending me an email or so also includes me. So happy to answer anything.
Yes, and I forgot one thing. So if you like this webinar, or even if you don't like it, in a few minutes we will send you a link to a short survey where you can provide what you thought was good, what you thought was bad, and also to indicate wishes or ideas for further webinars. So we will
do we have 1 minute just to ask my questions? Ihab al-Masri?
Yes, please. Okay. Let's go for it. So to the other.
I have very quick questions. The first one for the fuel subsidy. What do you mean by subsidy? The international price minus the local price, or production price or cost minus the local price? And then there is, as you know, there are many limitations for removing subsidy, including political, social, etc., etc. Can we have a percentage of removal? So in a country like Egypt, how much percentage we can remove the subsidy? Rough estimate number. Thank you.
Right. So the subsidy refers to the direct public funds that are used to make petrol cheaper, if you take it that very simple. And of course, every percent counts in that. So we're talking about very precious public funds. So every dollar that is not wasted on those very harmful from a environmental and energy perspective subsidies is valuable.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dear,
then thanks everyone. Yeah, sorry.
The question of fuel subsidies and fuel taxes is indeed controversially discussed, and my colleagues, so especially Armin Wagner, is dealing with this question for the last decade or so within the International Fuel Prices project. And I will just send you a link with where you can find further information on that issue, and probably we can also invite you to one of the next workshops on that. So during the course of that project,
thank you.
Regularly some workshops are organized for regulators in developing countries. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
So, all right. Thanks to everyone. Have a great day.
And you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.